how to read this figure.
Okay, let's look at songbirds. The far left bar, notice how it tapers up to the middle? Very thin line at the bottom. This is over water, by the way, just so you have that.
Yes.
That bar says that very few migrants are below 1,000 feet over water in the daytime for songbirds. They prefer to fly between 1,000 and 5,000 feet above the water in daytime. And then it tapers off after that to smaller numbers, up to 8,000 or even more feet. Is that what you were looking for, sir?
Yes. So what does your figure show with regard to the altitudes that songbirds fly during the daytime over land?
Shows that very few that are actively migrating are below a couple hundred feet above the ground. Most of the daytime songbird migrants over land are below 1,000 feet, and then it tapers down to very little above 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet. And for night migrants, it shows that very few are below about 400 feet, and then it starts to be more of them, up to about 2,000 feet. That's where that band, that altitudinal distribution between about 400 or 500 feet and 2,000 feet, there's most of those birds, and then it tapers off above that.
Okay. What does it show you with regard to the altitude that shorebirds fly over land at night?
It shows that shorebirds fly over land from about 400 or 500 feet up to 3,500 feet, higher than songbirds.
What does it show?
That's at night. They fly higher in the daytime.
Okay. What altitudes do they fly at during the daytime?
They don't get generally below, during migration, below about 800 or 900 feet, and there's a good number well up to 7,000 feet, 6,000 feet. Remember, these are generalities. I mean, this was an heuristic device to try to educate the reader as to where birds are in the night or the daytime sky when they're migrating.
Okay, what about waterfowl?
Waterfowl, over water. Over water
land.
during the day for water birds, quite low, below 1,000 feet generally. Over land, mostly fly higher, especially at night, day or night. They go upwards to 4,000 or 5,000 feet, and they taper off above that altitude.
And what about soaring birds?
Soaring birds, down to perhaps around 300 feet, maybe even less, and they average out at about 2,200 feet. There's more and more of them as you get higher, up to about that height, then it tapers down. Once they're over 4,000 feet, there's fewer and fewer of them. And on ridges, they're much lower. These are ridges like in the eastern United States, along the Appalachians, or even some of the western states on the Rockies. They'll fly fairly low.
What are the soaring birds that are referred to in this figure?
Eagles, ospreys, hawks, also things like gulls, but mostly for this one it's referring to hawks.
And the figures provides the altitudes for thermals for soaring birds, correct?
Yes, one of the two bars is thermals, and the text actually explains the other bar. It's orographic uplift. In other words, wind deflected off ridges or hills.
Are there thermals that are used by soaring birds in Seneca County?
There are thermals everywhere. Over Columbus today, you'll get thermals.
What is a thermal?
Thermal is a column or a bubble-like of air that rises because of the differential temperature and differential pressure. You get a warming of asphalt parking lot, for example, you get an updraft of air there, gulls will soar in that. But you can find thermals anywhere over the landscape.
When the soaring birds are not using the thermals to fly, then at what altitudes do they fly?
They frequently will sit in trees if there are no thermals to use. It's just too expensive physiologically to flap.
What if they're just flying from location to location?
Well, they will use thermals or they will use flapping flight.
And if they're using flapping flight, at what altitude would they fly?
It depends on what they're trying to do and what species is involved.
So generally speaking, at what altitude do they fly at when they're flapping their wings?
Well, they have to flap to take off, but each species is different in how far or how high they engage in that type of flight. And the habitat is important as well.
Is the flapping flight of soaring birds generally under 600 feet in altitude?
Much of it is, although you'll see birds at 1,000 feet pump their wings once in a while or in bursts.
With regard to the figure on page 166 that we've been discussing, do you still believe that this information is accurate today?
I think it's relatively accurate, yes. It's, remember, this is an heuristic device that's not meant to reflect to within 95% confidence intervals all the heights. This is not a textbook, in other words. This is not an empirical study. This is a generalization trying to help people understand approximately what altitudes, under what conditions. And this chapter goes on to discuss some of that.
If radar is being used to monitor flying birds at night, does that monitor show the altitudes at which the birds are flying?
It depends on the type of radar and how you're using it.
Okay, so there are some types of radar that can identify the altitudes of the migrating birds at night?
If they can discern the difference between the birds, bats, and moths, yes. If they can also get the right atmospheric conditions to be able to actually see them clearly, depends on the type of radar as well.
Are you familiar with the term point count as used to survey birds?
Yes.
Could you describe or define that term?
Point count is a location on the ground that you go to and you look for birds and you count or measure the behaviors of birds. You can use devices or you can just simply use your eye to approximate. And point counts are generally restricted to some diameter depending upon what type of information you're looking for and what types of birds.
And those point counts are done during daylight hours?
Not necessarily entirely. They're done from dawn sometimes where you have twilight, or even before dawn where you can have twilight conditions. I've used that method to publish on certain types of light.
Okay. Are they ever used during dark conditions other than the